All right, this is a public service announcement today around oppression, suffering, pain, and adversity. And if you know the Gene Keys, you know this is the territory that the Gene Keys loves to enter in order to transmute. So this is really your way, not out of suffering, but your way through suffering. So let's presence that as we begin this descent really into Gene Key 47. So today is September 10th, and the sun is highlighting Gene Key 47. So if you have a birthday, this is your life work. And 47 is a whopper. And so you should look in your hologenetic profile. Do you have 47 in your Venus sequence or in your Pearl sequence or in this activation sequence? Those are the three sequences of the Gene Keys that help you understand either what you're here to do, how you make money and be successful, and also how you love. And I love that because the Gene Keys is obsessed with us waking up to who we really are. And so 47 is the mother of all Gene Keys as it dives into suffering. Just going to make sure my audio is on here correctly. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with this one sentence that I believe holds us through this descent journey. And that is that your suffering is exactly equivalent to the greatness of your inner light. This is what Richard Rudd said in Gene Key 47. Your suffering is exactly equivalent to the greatness of your inner light. So let us not forget, let us remember in this journey that we are light. And so the shadow of oppression moves through the path of transmutation, which is an alchemical word. We would call it transformation, to the ultimate frequency of transfiguration. So, this is deep and complicated. And last year, I did the same transmission. So I love that it's been over a year that I do these transmissions. And I remember the transmission being around the rainbow body, this light body, the transfigured human body into light. And so we're going to talk about that. But if you want to get more of that, go back to last year's episode of Gene Key 47. Now, I have Gene Key 47 in several different places in my hologenetic profile. Well, really in my planetary profile. So it's in my Venus. And then in the hologenetic profile, it's in my SQ. And SQ means your spiritual intelligence. It's the wounding I received, or in the SQ is for all of us, the wounding we received in our early childhood. the pre-verbal subconscious. So this Gene Key means a lot to me, and I've had to work with it, especially my moon being in the 12th house. So everyone has their own relationship to suffering and pain and adversity. And as you explore your profiles, your astrology, you'll begin to understand how suffering in the world feels to you, manifests through you, how you have to work with it. And you'll even discover what are the ways that you try to not work with it. And this was the question I posed inside of our Facebook group. How are you working with, or what are you working with respect to your ancestral wounds? Because Gene Key 47 is the wounds of the collective. It's, yes, your personal wounds, the personal trials and tribulations you've gone through, your own unique suffering as the template of you. But it's also the suffering of everyone, the suffering of the collective. And I pause for a moment because we think our suffering is so unique, but our suffering is archetypal. Our suffering is indeed collective. This gene key says that all the suffering of the world is hidden in your junk DNA. All the ancestral woundings is hidden in the junk DNA of your physical body. So we know it. And we either contribute to it or we transmute it. I mean, that's what we get to do. And as we wake up, we become more skillful at the things that we're carrying and way more skillful at how to work with it. So again, this is creating a pathway through your suffering, not out of your suffering. So let's see. He says that every human being carries the entire evolutionary memory of humanity inside of your body. So that's actually beautiful to presence that, even though it's difficult to presence that. First of all, it's not personal. And secondly, that's how the body itself gets transmuted, gets alchemized into its light body. So let's go on this journey of how do we transform this suffering? Richard Rudd says this, and I think it's really brilliant to presence. True emotional breakthrough will not happen without crises. So that's the setup. We're going to have some crises. Someone's going to die. Something's going to go wrong. Some tragedy is going to occur, and that is going to bring us to our knees. And in that place, we have a choice. And that's what the gift frequency of transformation brings to us. Now, transformation is not change. Let's distinguish, because change is like fixing something. I've been reading Atomic Habits, and it's actually really brilliant because he brings in a quality of beingness, which for me is transformation. But at the level of habits, changing things up in your environment, doing things, like ways that you can intermittent fast or change certain structures in your business to make them flow more, standard operating procedures, train your employees, all kinds of things involve change, which is fixing. And that's great. That yields incredible results, but that's not transformation. And that's good, because this kind of oppression and adversity and suffering that Gene Key 47 represents does not yield to being fixed. So there already we have a distinction of the world that we're talking about. It's actually more existential angst. And I don't know about you, but this last few weeks and maybe even months, maybe even the whole year, I have been present to so much suffering, feeling so much suffering, not personally suffering, but feeling the suffering of the world, the suffering of my community, the suffering of people inside my community, the suffering of people around me. And that seems to be amplified. And maybe it's just that it's coming up to the surface where I get to work with it. So this is a ninja move that 47 brings to us. And I love it because it looks it directly in the face. And it's like, okay, we're going to talk about that thing that everyone wants to promise you out of. And yet this kind of oppression will not yield to being fixed. So I was just on Facebook yesterday, and I saw someone posted this quote, and I don't know It was Michelle, and I don't think it's the same Michelle as here, but she said, and this is from J-Lo. So I love that it was from J-Lo. Sometimes you have to explore the darkness to get to the light and get back to who you are. Yeah. And that to me is to remember. Sometimes you have to explore the darkness. And I love that the word is explore the darkness to get to the light and remember who you are. So transformation happens at the level of being. We're going to explore one of the archetypes of this transfiguration, and that's the archetype of the Christ. So apparently there are 160,000 cases, reported cases of individuals, let's call them saints, who have transmuted their physical body into light, into a rainbow body. I suspect that that happens upon death. And in those 160 cases, there was something that happened to their physical body. So in this Gene Key 47, we're actually talking about our physical body. And I believe that we are all light and that we are accessing our light body now. So if I go back to a year when I made this transmission of Gene Key 47, that really set me up that 4 months later, I actually had a light body experience. So I think that's happening more and more, that we're getting to understand the nature and quality of the light that we carry beyond the density that we are in human form. So most of these 160,000 people who have had this experience of their physical body morphed into light, their body like shrunk at death. I just heard about a Tibetan monk who died, or a Rinpoche who died, and his body emitted a perfume. And they kept his body there, not even on dry ice. They kept his body in the room. And this was like, my friend went to go see this a year ago in Northern California, and they were having viewings, and they kept extending the time because his body was not decaying like a body usually does in 3 days. So that's just interesting. And that's like something to put into our consciousness, that we are more than who we think we are. That's really, to me, the teaching of this. And to know that light frequency, even here, even now, is also the teaching of this gene key. So if we pick up the teaching of the Christ, and the reason why I think that teaching stands out is because there is a death element. It's not just that his body became transfigured into light. It's that the archetypal legend is that the Christ went to hell. So remember, in Gurdjieff's work of the ray of creation, we are at level 48, and that the imaginal world is level 24. That's the world of non-causal magic, miracles. And then above that is world 12, and that's the world of the Christ, the sun, the warmth, the unconditional love. So imagining that energy descending into hell. Now, Cynthia Bourgeault points out that there is actually no scriptural reference that the Christ went to hell. It's part of the archetypal legend. And I really love that kind of oral tradition. So let's imagine not whether it's true or not true, but how we can learn from this context. So hell is a realm, not a place. So imagine that all of us have visited that hell realm. Who does not know that hell realm? And I'm going to read a little bit from that transmission that I gave. I think it was back in the summer, early summer here, June, where we talked about the ray of creation and these worlds, these levels. So let's go back to, we're at world 48. This is the world that we know, the biosphere, where it represents the best of human culture. But it is not conscious. That is actually when level 24 breaks through, after we've had this kind of shock, this awakening. So we go back to below this level, which is like the first fruits of civilization. Below that, we begin to enter into the realm that we would call hell. Now, world 96 underneath this realm is the realm of autopilot. So that's the first indicia of hell, where we go on autopilot. And how many of us, how many of, like, this is just part of the human existence. We have touched this place. No matter who we are as awakened spiritual women, we have touched this hell. It's the world that is stale and conditioned. This is what we're breaking out of. When we say awakened, we are waking up from our conditioning. It's stereotypical, it's recycled opinions, it's conditioned habitual cliches, personality driven. The world of autopilot. And then below that is world 192. So remember, they go exponential. This is that deeper hell realm, disordered, psychotic, evil, demonic, unbearable density. The number reflects the level of density, the level of rules, craving, wrath, envy, desire, obsession, fixated. He said, this is Gurdjieff, the self-reflexive consciousness turns in on itself like a rabid dog biting its master. So this is when our thought forms, our negativity, our self-hatred turns on ourselves and also projects out at the world. He says it's a final outpost before consciousness collapses into outer darkness and goes comatose. And Gurdjieff actually chronicles like the depths of this kind of dissension, devolution, down to 12,288. So imagine all these layers. So Earth, our biosphere, is really like this middle place. So presencing that's heavy. And we can feel that way. We can feel that kind of density. And we certainly know that it exists. So when we go back to that story of the Christ descending into this realm, what did he do there? What happened? And this is where Cynthia Bourgeault picks up some teachings from her mentors and teachers. One of the mystics she follows is Jakob Burma, a medieval mystic, who said the words that God could not enter hell, but love could. And when I feel into, like, not whether that's true or not true, but I just take that on as a context, it has me then seeing that event totally differently. So what Cynthia Bourgeault says is that in that 3 days, from the crucifixion on that Friday to the resurrection on that Sunday, the Christ consciousness visited these realms of sheer and utter negativity, oppression, adversity, pain, and suffering. And he sat there as love. Just feel that for a moment. Like when you are in your darkest moments, something breaks through. Maybe it is the noticing of the birds screeching in the air. Maybe it's the noticing of the soft fur of a bunny that darts in front of your path. Maybe it's the noticing of the light in the sky at sunset. That something that breaks through. And that something is love. So as she understands it, Cynthia Bourgeot, this Episcopal priest and scholar, recontextualizing that event for us. Pure love, just witnessing, just being with, not trying to fix it, not judging it, simply bearing witness to its existence. And then it is done. It is complete. And so out of that density and that depth, you can hear the faint singing of angels. You can hear the whispers of light. You can see the horizon. And have you ever had that experience in your darkest moments when you are on your knees, when you didn't give up? Because you're here, so I know you didn't give up. The dawn emerged. And that brings us to our holy yes. Last week, we talked about our sacred no. And that sacred no makes space for this holy yes. Because you see, the thing is, you have free will. Now, the free will isn't to control others, even control how life shows up for you. Your free will is simply your choice of how you choose to be with it. So yesterday I bought this deck about the white light deck oracle. And I was like, I have no idea why I'm buying this white light oracle. But when I started to read through it, I was like, oh, it's bringing in the ecstatic, bringing in this love. And so I asked it a question, in last week has had a lot of technical stuff going on. And I asked it this question, and I even said to this oracle, I'm not even sure you're capable of answering this. But why is this happening? What do I need to know? And I pulled this card, and the card said, it's time for you to take responsibility for how you're choosing to look at this. And I was like, woo, bam. Because herein lies the secret of the transformation that's possible on the way to becoming light. And the church bells are chiming in. I love that. And that is that it's so tempting to be a victim. And that consciousness is so insidious, right? It just sneaks in. Once you thought, I've really reclaimed my sovereignty here. I've really reclaimed my responsibility and my choosing. And then it sneaks in some way by just the languaging that we might use, like, you made me, this made me. Or just the edge of attitude that something's being done to me. And that's really what I was seeking advice, seeking a shift in my perspective. So then I asked myself, and here's where I get to be practical on our way to our holy yes. As I worked through the trials, the adversity of last week, that in some moments really had me slapping my head with the palm of my hand and finding myself so irritated and so angry that I just named it to myself, like, yeah, you're angry. Notice that. So it was a witness and a notice. And just to go a little more curious and a little deeper with it, as all my attempts to fix it just resulted in me being angrier. So I went down to the ocean and I sat there and I noticed that I wasn't angry anymore. And I asked myself, what was the difference? And I realized that I wasn't resourced. I just did with Claire Dash in our community, just completed her Transforming Trauma course. And we just did a podcast that we're going to release soon. And it's so good. Claire is truly a master. And I'm excited for this course. I think everyone should take it because we are going to need the best tools possible to deal with Gene Key 47 and this ancestral trauma. As it really never goes away. And this is what the Gene Key says. It's just this lapping ocean, the water that comes to the shore, this over and over and over again, asking us to just peel the layers back, to reinvent who we think we are, to let go of our identity. And so when I realized that I was actually resourced in that moment, and that's why that anger had left me, I got to track that over the course of the week, the indicia of trauma of the fight, the flight, the freeze, the fawning. And I came up with another one, the flooding. I felt like I was flooded by the suffering of the world. And I was noticing that my attention, my habits were such that on my Facebook feed, I was seeing all these dogs that need to be rehomed. And I talked about this last week. I mean, this is just a metaphor for me of the suffering of the world. And I noticed I was getting angrier and angrier as a way of protecting myself from really feeling the grief and the change, what that might mean for people, that they have to give up their dog and find a new home, and reading about the changing circumstances of people's lives. And so I realized that those habits of watching, sifting through those posts came to a point that they were flooding me, in addition to, let's say, like the stuff that my friends were going through, the stuff that I was aware of inside of our community. And that flooding made me feel like, not made me, see, I do that, right? That flooding, that perception of the flooding just had me feel like it was enough, like I was underwater. This was enough. So when I went to the water and just took some deep breaths and smelled the ocean, which for me, allowing my eyes to see the beauty, my nostrils to take in the scent. Maybe it's of a flower. Maybe it's of the salt. Maybe it's of the evergreen trees outside your home. Just a fully tactile, embodied experience of something life-giving. That experience of flooding left. And so we get to talk about in our sisterhood activation, how do we resource ourselves? We're coming up to a new moon, and I'm going to do a whole different new moon transmission, because this was really such a deeper preparation and truly outlives any moon cycle. It's ubiquitous for what it means to be human and what the opportunity is for us to bring the divine. And how do we bring the divine? We bring it through our love, through our witness. Now, when we look back at Christ and his consciousness being inside this hell realm for 3 days, I was thinking about it today. Was he really just sitting there? Maybe he was if you were embodied, right? I was imagining on the earth, grabbing at dirt, flinging it around, like a woman in labor. You're not just sitting there. You might be that archetype of cosmic mother holding it, but there may be times when your hand is in the sand or in the dirt, your knees are in the dirt, and you're writhing, you're moving. Maybe you're spitting. Maybe you're yelling and screaming or shaking. All of it without a story that any of it is wrong. It just is what it is. And you get to transmute it in your body. That's what we get to do on earth. And so, people have said, and I've mentioned this before, that they just want it all to be light. Well, here's what all light looks like. It's just a white piece of paper. It's blank. There's no contrast. You can't see anything. You are blinded. There's nothing there. So the beauty of being in form, embodied, it's that it's both and. And our embodiment is the vehicle of this alchemy. I'll say this last thing, and then we can take some comments and see how this is landing for you before we end. So there was a time sometime in 2020 where I had my own reckoning. There was a pattern that I knew that I had that I couldn't shake. I just couldn't shake. It had me. It was like the devil in the tarot, where the chains are around your neck and your hands are on the chain. And at any point you can pull them off, but it was just lost on me. And so this kind of transformation can be incremental. So in 2020, talk about a series of events that went nuclear in my life. And at the same time, I'm still showing up for my community and giving. And that's where I learned that you can actually break down and still give when you're really resourced and you've cultivated enough inner, the word that comes to me is stamina, and in a spine that you can actually do both. So I was doing both. It didn't affect my work at all. In fact, it probably deepened my work. But in my personal life, there was a nuclear event that happened, and it brought me to my knees. And in this weird way, I met this man at the beach. He walked right up to me and he started talking to me. And I asked him, "What is your name?" And he said his name was Jesus. I was like, of course it is. So I got the sign. Yeah, you're in hell, but you're not alone. And so it was really 3 days. That's where I got the download of the body, the mind, and the spirit, and the 3 ways to work with the body, mind, and spirit. And that's not for this time, but what I ended up saying as I emerged out of those 3 days was that hell is not hell. Hell is a transformational, transmutational fire. It is the thing that, if we allow it, can burn off all of the not self, that layer of the not self that wants to be burned off, that's up for your seeing. It can be burned off and purified and turned into a crystalline diamond. And so if you're going through that, if you're going through your version of hell, or when you do go through that version of hell, know that you've got this. You've got the tools through your own embodiment to meet it, to feel it, to witness it, and to transform it through the power of your love. Oh, so I'm just going to read a few comments. Yeah. Feel free to share in the comments. How did this land for you? What are you taking away from this? I'm going to keep the recording going on a little so that if you're listening to this in the replay, you'll know this is a live event inside of the Evolving Sisters Network Sisterhood. Yeah. Yeah. Lola can relate to the anger. Yes, I know you love dogs as much as I do, sister. Yeah. So life keeps presenting itself. And in those instances, Lola, with the dogs or with the children or with the climate change, when we make ourselves separate and say they over there are doing this thing, then we perpetuate a duality that's part of the setup. That's part of our contract. When we said we were going to come to planet Earth, we agreed to be in duality. And so when we judge something, we amplify the duality. Eckhart Tolle said this in A New Earth, or it was in The Power of Now, one of those two, where he said that basically they live together. And the more that you judge it, the more that you keep it in its place. And I discovered that work, that writing of Eckhart Tolle, during the time when I was working on an organization to fight child sex trafficking. And believe me, that was massively triggering, as you can imagine. So I started to work with my own judgments. How can I do this work? Knowing what I know about the suffering of people and the perpetrators, how can I do this work come from a different place? And I can't say that I mastered it. I can say that I'm working with it. Like that's the gift of being awakened. Yeah, what you focus on grows. Exactly. Expand your Jupiter energy and witness it. Witness it through the power of your love. Sandy says, I love the idea that space is being held for me while I sit in the hell and in the fire. Yeah. Yeah. And ask for a sign. If you need a sign, ask for a sign. Could the dark night of the soul, Rosanna asked, be the elongation of this hell when we resist it? Yeah, it could be. And also, maybe it's part of this. I think that you popped on after I said this quote from Richard Rudd, and that was that. I can't seem to find it. Oh, yeah, here we go. True emotional breakthrough will come from a crisis. So that dark night of the soul is actually the fire that makes the diamond. So yeah, it's like a medicine journey. All the advice I've ever been given by, when I talk to shaman and I say like, okay, I'm going to do this medicine journey, but I don't know that I really want to because all this darkness and all this shit comes. And every single time, what do they say? Don't resist it. And what is the best way to not resist something? Think about it. The best way to not resist it for me when I go into that is to breathe. Yeah, surrender. Yeah. So what are the mechanisms of surrender? Noticing when I contract and I'm holding and I'm resisting and I'm in fear. Just first noticing. And then secondly, allowing my breath to deepen, to expand. Yeah. Let it move through you. Let it move through you. Right. If I make it a story, if I hold on to it and I say that it is something, oh shit, this is really something I have to solve. Oh no, I have to solve the dog crisis in the world. Like that's where my system goes. And it goes to this contraction and the breath moves up and I can't breathe and I'm suffocated. And now I'm flooded and I'm underwater. And so the breath, deepening the breath, maybe all that is needed in this space, in this moment, until I get some other instruction, is to witness it, not flinch away, witness it. Can I breathe with it? And remember the archetype. Yeah, scoping way out. Yeah, I got that. That's a good one. Like see yourself as the object, become the subject, see yourself as the object. I love that. Yeah, so if we bring back the archetype of that resurrection, of that crucifixion moment when Mary Magdalene is at the foot of the cross with Jesus's mother, like think about the love that's being held right there. We've talked about this before. That you're always held, like that love, that gaze is never letting you go. Yeah, and notice the savior in the drama triangle. Oh my goddess. Yes, right? Thank you for presencing that. This is why this is so good that we keep this recording going a little bit. Because, right, the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer. Woohoo! Like there we have another setup. And so noticing that each of those characters, archetypal characters, keep the whole drama going. So dropping the rope. Breathe, breath of fire for 3 minutes. I love that. Exactly. All right. So we have some great tools. Thank you for all of that. I think we're going to end here. Let's gather this energy. So now we have come full circle. Let's take that energy and imagine that our hands are like wood. They're like sticks. And we are creating fire through this heat in our hands, taking all that needs to be transformed. And this actual exercise is something you can do. Taking any darkness, finding it any place inside your body that wants to receive the light of your attention and love, and bringing it in between your hands and rubbing it together like you are creating fire. And then as your hands are vibrating, I can feel my hands vibrating. Oh. Bringing through the holy yes. As we choose to be here, we have said yes to this. As we look our pain, our suffering, our adversity in the face, and we say, yes, I choose to be here. I choose to be here as love, as a witness. I choose to be the vehicle and the vessel of transformation through my witness and love for the benefit of all beings. So let's bring our hands into prayer pose and offer up as a beautiful incense is offered up as a prayer, that all of our suffering is transmuted into a prayer for the benefit of all beings. Namaste.